Thank you all for coming. This is my first presentation here as your career counselor at Southwestern. I just joined the team here in September, but I've spoken about resume writing in many different forums within lots and lots of disciplines across the curriculum. And what I have here to talk about today is applicable to really the beginning resume writer, the new college student, all the way up to somebody with a 7-page academic CV, somebody with lots of experience. I'm going to try to share some broad brushstroke truths, some guidelines, some tips, and some rules that will help you get started to writing an effective document that will help you accomplish your goals. And then within respiratory therapy or nutrition and dietetics or engineering technology or accounting, there are many discipline-specific considerations to take into account, but this is a good starting point for any of that. So I'm going to talk about how to market yourself and write a work-ready resume for any field. And again, these are some broad guidelines to get started. And I'm going to start with simply a definition of a resume. Can anybody define a resume for me? Raise your hand and define a resume. Yes, sir.
Compilation of your skills and your abilities and your history in that field.
That's a good, accurate, concrete definition of a resume. You said a compilation of your skills and abilities and experiences and credentials. And yes, that is the definition of a resume, but it's not just a repository for what you've done. An effective resume would be a paper, digital, or online document. And we're going to look at a paper resume today, the most conventional, most easily recognized resume that you all think of as a resume. But it's any kind of paper, digital, or online document that strategically represents select information in a way that connects dots. And that's a metaphor I'd like you to remember throughout this presentation. It connects dots between who you are, what you've done in a specific job industry or employer, what you want to do. That's what an effective resume will do. It could be that when you copy and paste your paper resume, and I'm going to show you how to create one that you can do this with, to LinkedIn fields, experience fields, and education fields, or to an application form that is web-based and you're not able to attach a PDF document of your resume, you should be able to still represent what you've done strategically in a way that connects these dots. So what does that mean? Strategic representation would include things like, and you mentioned this, what's your name?
Chase.
So Chase said experience, credentials, what you've done. So first of all, experience. And if you look at employer surveys and articles written in investigative journalism and articles written in periodicals and sources within my field, employers almost overwhelmingly say that what they are most interested in above all else is experience. And I'm going to talk more about that. Also, clearly, education and credentials. What do we all have in common here at Southwestern?
Education.
Yeah, we're seeking a credential. We're seeking a diploma or a degree or a certification. We're in class. We're getting educated. We're gaining credentials. That's a type of credential. So ask our certifications if you're in a certification-heavy field or a licensure-heavy field. But education and credentials is another box that any employer is going to want to check. And I'm going to show you how to represent that as well. Resumes also represent accomplishments and skills, and this is key. Now, I'm going to talk about the difference between a skills resume and a reverse chronological resume, which I think we all need to, in most cases, use. But still, within any reverse chronological resume, you'll undoubtedly have skill sections. It may be computer skills or technology skills or language skills or something like that. But there are also other ways to embed skills throughout your document. Skills or competencies, some employers call them, and this is key. And so what constitutes a skill? Have y'all heard these terms, hard skills and soft skills? No. You're going to hear them a lot more. Southwestern Community College's Quality Enhancement Plan, which is going to be an institutional-wide effort to make sure that all of our graduates across the curriculum in every program and every level develop a certain type of skill set that makes them work ready or ready for employment or ready to enter a 4-year institution. If that's your goal, to take your next step to achieve your goals, you need a certain skill set. And so there are these terms that you're going to see: hard skills and soft skills. And those are just common terms for something I'm going to define more thoroughly with you. But what do you think a hard skill is?
Something that you can physically do.
Yeah, that's a good definition. Sometimes it throws people off to use the word hard. They think it means difficult. And a hard skill, or a soft skill for that matter, could be difficult or it could be easy or anything in between. But in this case, think of the word hard as concrete, something that you can do with your hands, something that you can demonstrate manually would definitely be a hard skill. There are a lot of hints up here. You can see this fellow with his tool set. Don't have a nurse or respiratory therapist. Any of the work that you might do with technician type things, with technical equipment, that would be a hard skill set. It may be there are some nuances to applying it that move into soft skills, but carpenters and brick masons, those are hard skill sets. ASR, EMTs, paramedics, police officers, anybody who does things that are really concrete, actually basically using an application or software package might be a hard skill set too. A hard skill is something I can train you to do. Now, I can't train you to be a nurse or a respiratory therapist on the job. You've got to get education for that and do a lot of clinical training, but it's still there are some hard skill sets there. What are some soft skills then? What would be a soft skill? How would you define it?
Emotional.
Things you can't really
Yeah.
watch happen.
Right, you can't see emotions. You can't watch it, you can't touch it, you can't, I probably can't train you to do this on the job. You're going to hear this term a lot because it is the fundamental core of our quality enhancement plan, and it's very much what employers say that they are looking for in successful applicants. And so I want you to think about this as you write your resumes and as you describe your experiences and as you describe what you've learned in the classroom in a way that connects dots and applies to the workplace. So a soft skill, yes, you said emotional, maybe emotional competence on the job. Certainly communication skills would be a soft skill set, whether that's written communication or it's presentations and oral communication, or it's communicating within whatever context of your workplace in an appropriate way. These are soft skill sets. Research skills, analytical skills, complex problem-solving skills, things like this that I can't see, touch, hear, or feel, and more importantly, that need to be practiced and incorporated along with those hard skills and as you prepare to be an effective professional person. So these are soft skills, and a lot of people don't like these terms. I used to give an annual presentation to a philosophy class, and that humanities professor said, "I hate the word soft skills, because what does soft sort of imply to you?" Weak, easy, soft and fuzzy, not serious. And in reality, they're very serious skill sets that take many years sometimes to develop. And I prefer to call them core competencies that transfer across the curriculum, across all sectors of employment, and will make you effective in any field. So soft skill sets. Now, I'm going to talk about how to incorporate those. I want you to remember to incorporate those as you describe your work on your resumes. Don't forget hard skills. They're important too, but you need to think about leadership, communication, flexibility and adaptability within organizations. These are important. Okay, so steps in any application before we even start the resume. Have you researched the employer? I can't tell you how many interviews I've been a part of where the candidate comes in and apparently hasn't really thoroughly been to our website yet, doesn't know what we do. And so it's very important to do some basic research at the very least. Ideally, you're going to talk to somebody, network at a job fair, talk to a recruiter about what it's like to work there, possibly use Career Coach and other tools that the Career Center offers you to do some serious investigation. Go Google them. But at least go to the website, familiarize yourself with the employer, what's important to them. Do they have a mission statement? Have you read the job description very thoroughly? Research the employer so that you can do two things. So that you can target your letter of application. And this is a resume writing discussion, but the two are very, very closely connected. So I am going to talk about letters towards the end. But can you write a targeted letter of application? A generic letter of application is useless, and I'll tell you why later. But have you customized your resume? You can't really customize your resume and connect those dots unless you've researched the employers. That's the first step. Here are some basic rules to writing a resume. The first one's consistency. But you know, there are fewer rules to writing resumes than many people believe. And if you talk to a career counselor like me, a professor in your discipline, I heard somebody in an unnamed discipline yesterday in a meeting say, employers want this. And it was so uniform and generalized that I wanted to say, well, that's not always true. There are exceptions to lots of rules. But there are some basic ones that you need to know on any kind of resume. And the first is consistency. I've got my preferences for how to represent information. I think it's fairly effective. I've got good reasons for each thing that I do. They're grounded on best practices and on a lot of reading and a lot of talking to employers. But one thing's for sure, there are different ways to represent information, and there are lots of different formats for resumes, and one's not inherently better than the other or right versus wrong. But whatever you do, be consistent. I like putting dates and locations of places I've studied or worked on the right side of my page. I tab them over. There's a good reason for that. It's not the only way to represent that information, but what you want to avoid is putting some dates and locations on the left and others on the right, italicizing some and not others, things like that. And so have a sharp eye for consistency throughout the document in terms of how you represent information from a format point. One-page resumes are desirable for most current college students. It is possible, and I want you to be aware of this lest you get confused about what's appropriate, and you'll hear different things from different people and from different employers. But there is a drift in this country, in the United States, towards a 2 or more page resume in many professions. Some of that is because of the digital world we live in, and we're not printing resumes as often on bonded printed paper anymore, and it doesn't matter as much. Part of the reason is that the college students now do so much more than they did when I was in school in the late 80s, where it was enough to study hard, to do well, and to represent your experience and your education on your resume and apply for your job. Now you guys do related community service work, hopefully in clinics or with the constituent population that you're going to be serving in your sector of employment, or you'll be encouraged to intern and gain related experience. If you're in healthcare or teaching, education of any kind, you're definitely going to do some practicum type of experiences, some clinical type of experiences, and things like that. But things add up, and that's my personal hypothesis for why a drift towards a 2-page resume in some fields. Some of you, if you move on to a 4-year degree, by the time you've done, you add your experience from now to your clinical experience in a 4-year degree, or your teaching experience and your related service learning, your related undergraduate research, leadership, and community positions and initiatives, things like that. Then you may eventually have a 2-page resume. For now, you'll have a 1-page resume. There are some other basic rules, and this is the biggest one. It should be first, along with consistency. I was driving to work a couple of years ago, and I heard an NPR sketch where they interviewed a bunch of employers, and they were representing the data, and they said 47%, I think this is 2010 or 2009, but 47% of employers said that it would end your application, put it in the round file, eliminate you as a candidate if you had typos on your resume, or if you hadn't proofread it and you had bad grammar. Why do you think I was surprised? That surprised me. Take a guess. Okay, I can't pause.
Anybody would not proofread there.
Oh yeah, that's surprising too. Yes.
I was going to say that
grammar check and things like that. So I would think unless you used a typewriter, it'd be pretty hard to.
Right. Well, you have to, as you know, you have to sort of proofread your spell check too, because it can substitute the wrong word, and or, you know, that word doesn't mean what you think it means, that type of thing. But you're right about that. That is a big help. What surprised me is that more like 90% of employers wouldn't eliminate your candidacy because of these things. And as a matter of fact, when I talk to employers, almost all of them have strong feelings about this, and I would posit that probably a significant additional percentage would look pretty darkly on it. You really hurt your candidacy if you don't take the simple step of proofreading and fixing typos and things like that. And by all means, use your career center. Bring it to me. I'd be happy to look at your resume and be another reader, be a proofreader, if not for content and strategy and everything else, certainly at least for grammar. So take great pains there. And then this is my last rule, and this is not actually a rule, and as a matter of fact, our career coach program that has a fairly simple template that could be a decent start for some students who are having trouble getting started. But I'm really opposed to using automated templates like you find in Word, like you find on the internet, like you find in a lot of applications and job search engines and things like that. The reason that I'm opposed to using a template is that they are typically rigid, and when I said your resume needs to be strategic, you need to be able to move things around depending on what you're applying for. You may move a whole section of experience higher up if it relates more to this job than that one. You need to be able to add to it easy. And basically it should be a living document. It shouldn't just be that passive repository for what you've done, but it should be adaptable and it should grow with your experience. Templates tend to be very rigid and not allow that. If you've ever tried to copy and paste and move things around on invisible word tables and things like that. The other reason is, it's my opinion, that you can create a more simple and elegant and effective document using Microsoft Word. So here are some other points of wisdom. When I say a reverse chronological resume, what do I mean?
It's a timeline.
Yeah, it's timeline.
Now and then go back.
Yeah, it's a vertical timeline. And typically within each section or heading, you put the most recent stuff higher and then you go down. And if you start moving things around out of that order, then you've broken that consistency rule. It also makes it a lot easier to read. People anticipate a reverse chronology when they look at resumes. Functional or skill resumes tend to be, all the headings are dealing with skills that I talked about, things that you know how to do or can offer. But a pure functional or skill resume, there are occasionally some reasons to have those, but usually they're a little off-putting because it pulls from different jobs and experiences, and I can't tell where or for how long you practiced that skill. So I would rather, in many cases, having most of those skills embedded in bullet points within actual jobs, experiences, and other areas of the resume. However, I will borrow from the functional or skill category to create dedicated computer skill sections and things like that. Well, I'll pull that out, and it'll be a little lower down on the document or higher up if it's core to what the employer is looking for. I would recommend using Microsoft Word. I would recommend saving and sending any resume as a PDF and not as a Word doc of any kind, because PDFs are locked. There's always a chance if you send a Word document that somebody accidentally deletes something, or they have a different version of Word, and your pretty elegant tabbed over dates and locations get skewed, get left oriented or moved around. And you can do a last proofread and lock it as a PDF. Then also use professionalism even in details. Email address, personal information, and activities, things like that. So these are stylistic points of wisdom. So before I talk about name and contact, just a couple of other points of wisdom, stylistic suggestions. Don't use script font for your name. Apply that consistency rule to things like font size and font type, that kind of thing too. These are nuanced consistencies, but overall it'll have a stronger effect on the document. Don't create all of the disadvantages of a template by using columns or by using that ruler at the top of the Word document to create custom tab stops and things like that. That tends to make the document more complicated and hard to follow and hard to move things around. The other thing is avoid color and too many graphs and lines and things like that. Keep it simple. Use that stuff sparingly. A horizontal line underneath your name and contact information is okay, but lines between each section, there's nothing, you're not breaking a rule, but it starts to make the document look busy, and so I'd avoid some of that. Okay, is the first thing that goes on a resume, and I recommend just conventionally center, justifying it at the top, center positioning at the top of your document. I've seen people put it on the left or the right, and there's not a real great reason for that. It's not wrong or right. So this is a convention. What's wrong with this?
Party to the max.
Yeah, the email address is a little off-putting, isn't it? You folks, Southwestern Community College students, are too sophisticated to do something like that with their email address. But you know, what I would do is use my Southwestern address because it's easy to find. It associates you with your college. If you want to create a Gmail address or something like that, a Hotmail address, a Yahoo address, then just use some version of your name. And this is a very, that's actually a good strategy, because if I get 80 emails a day and I'm looking for yours, then Chase, what's your last name?
Souza.
Sorry?
Souza.
Souza. So I remember Chase Souza, but I don't remember Badminton King at Gmail. That's a nicknamey address that maybe isn't unprofessional to that extent, but it's just not professional either. And it doesn't connect to Chase. So if Chase sends me an email with his resume because I solicited that, or because that's what he's directed to do in an application, or I'm looking for it, then I would use chasesouza@gmail.com or something like that. I can find it in my email box. There are some other things wrong with this. Can anybody?
Seaweed, North Carolina.
Right. Don't abbreviate things with using abbreviations that don't exist. North Carolina is incorrectly abbreviated. I'm okay with NC. I don't use many abbreviations on resumes. I don't abbreviate October, for example, but NC is fine. That's the wrong zip code. A comma doesn't belong between state and zip code. Drive isn't capitalized, and why abbreviate drive, lane, or street? It's a formal document. Just write it out. And then what's missing?
Phone number.
Yep, you need a phone number. A few years ago, we told college students to use their landlines. Now, lots of people raise your hand if you don't have a landline, right? Well, times have changed, and quickly. So do use your cell phone. Don't have a ring-back tone or an unprofessional greeting with roommates singing in the background. As soon as your resume is in play, you need to have a simple, professional greeting. Hi, this is Chase. I can't come to the phone right now. Please leave a message and I'll call you back. You don't have to be all formal, but just be professional and simple. A couple of nuances. Don't use different italicized fonts and things like that, or script fonts. Use the same size font. Your name can be a little bit bigger. That's an exception, but not banner sized across the entire page. Now, a little bit of a trick question. What's wrong with the name? Nothing. I made up a ridiculous name to throw people off, but I told you it was a trick question. Your name is your own name, and you can use it formally and completely, no matter what it is, if you want. I would not use a nickname that's unprofessional and that you don't go by, but if Max shortens his name to Maximus, to Max all the time, then by all means you can do that on a resume. I go by my middle name. Anybody else go by your middle name? It's a pain in doctor's offices. Yes, because my first name's John, and I have to remember to answer to John if I'm in a government or a doctor's office. So on my resume, I take the liberty of saying J. Michael Despeaux so that people call me Michael, and I don't have to correct them all day, and you feel free to do that. A government job application might be different, but this is your document. Okay, objective statements, good or bad?
Good.
Good. Some people like them, some people hate them. Let me give you some guidelines. First of all, not all resumes need an objective. If you're going to a job fair and you're casting a pretty wide net, then you can't really write a targeted objective. But they can be useful when there's no cover letter in a situation like that. They can be useful if they target the reader, like I talked about the resume doing throughout. And it should be short, not a life story or anything like that, not a career objective that's too broad and too far-reaching. I like the clip art because it needs to hit the target. And it should be specific about what you can bring or contribute. It should say what you can bring, not what you want. So seeking a job, name the position, but where I can contribute X, Y, and Z. So if it's off the mark, if it falls short like those arrows, then it's probably going to do more harm than good. And that's why a lot of people don't like them. So is that a good one? Yes, no? No? Too vague, right? Objective, wanting beyond entry-level position with cutting-edge company where I can advance, earn a high salary, be successful. We all want that, right? Or not necessarily company. No, why?
Because it puts what you want.
It's selfish, right? It's all about you, not them. How about that? Yes, no? Exhilarating. Provide TQM. Thank you, that's a great word for that, fluffy. That doesn't really say anything. Exhilarating is not a good word for a resume or a professional document. It's over the top. TQM is a buzzword. I'm trying to, unless they want that in the job description, which is a different story, then I'm throwing business sector buzzwords at you. Progressive situational leadership. Maybe that has military applications or crisis management, but you know, what does that even mean in most contexts? It just sounds like I'm putting a lot of big words together. Facilitate corporate success is way overreaching. So that is why lots of people hate objectives right there. How about that one? Seeking blank with blank, where I can take advantage of this thing that I know that they're proud of. I've been to their center in Atlanta. They've got an institute dedicated to it where I can contribute X, Y, and Z. It looks long, but on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, it's only a couple of lines. That's a decent objective. That's, if you can do that, then you may benefit from an objective. If you can connect dots between who you are and what they want and draw them in to read the rest of the document. Okay, let's see what this strong retail experience concept includes. So that is situationally when you might want an objective. Education, don't put it at, this is just my opinion, don't hide it at the bottom of your document. I see sometimes academic CVs, which are long documents, with education on page 3. Never do that. I think you could just put it at the top. It's a box that people want to check. They want to see what you're doing and what you're studying, and it's one of the first credentials that is going to qualify you for a job. Use accurate language. A lot of people may not know what AAS stands for, or use the right preposition. I have to look it up sometimes. Is this a of or in applied science? I'll go to the website, or I'll look at the 8-semester plan, or the program listings, and make sure I'm using the right language. Use bullet points for things like major, minor, GPA, and typically, and this is not a rule, it's just a line in the sand, but the convention is to put your GPA on there if it's 3.0 or higher, and not if it's below 3.0. And you may still be a very successful candidate, but that's just a common line in the sand. And then also, and there are lots of exceptions here, but you can include certifications or licensure along with education in that section. In some fields, like EMT is a good example, they have so many certifications. I might have a whole different section for certifications, law enforcement, EMT, certification, heavy fields where there's 9 or 10 different things, I'd have a different section. But if it's 1 or 2 or one that's critical to your field, I'd add it under education. So here's what that might look like. Education and certification, Southwestern Community College, tab across. Here's a point that I haven't made yet. These, look, I've got a mistake on the PowerPoint. The tabs are wrong, but tab that across. Never use your space bar to move things around on the document. It makes a mess. It's not what it's intended to do. You want to tab across, and then you're going to lock it with the PDF. You see the degree there and the expected graduation date. You don't have to put your span of years, 2012 to 2016. Just put May 2016 or expected May 2016. And then it depends on what you're studying, but if it's a long word, then you can put it as a bullet point, program of study in or major in business administration. If it's a really short word and fits on that line, you can say associate or AAS in business administration. So there are different ways to do that. I put a certification there. I put our own through the Employability Center. You can get a career readiness certification, which would be an amazing thing for every student to add to their resume. It says that you've proven that you've got certain soft skills that we talked about, core skills. And then below that, we'll move on to experience. Over here, experience, I want you to start thinking about headings. I do want you to target this document. And by that, I mean stay away from generic headings. Please don't just put employment and then start listing jobs you've had. You can do better than that. You can target the recipient. What type of employment? At the very least, put work experience. That's a key word that employers are looking for. It'll scream out at me. Headings are bold. And so it's a way to really communicate what you've done in a way that connects those dots. So experience, better than experience. I'd use related experience, better than related experience. If I was applying for a management job, I'd say management experience. If I was applying to be a respiratory therapist, I would say respiratory therapy, and pay attention to the norms within your field. If you're not able, if that accidentally implies professional experience, say respiratory therapy clinical experience or something like that, or observation experience, make sure it's appropriate. And I work with professors in different settings to make sure that a student's using language. I'm a generalist, they're specialists, and so we can work together to help you make sure that you're using correct language. But sales, other employment, that kind of thing. If you didn't have a title, use a functionally accurate one. Don't, if you were a housekeeper, say waste removal engineer. That's padding your resume and it's ridiculous and it's off-putting. But if you didn't have a title, then you could say, well, you know, I was an employee, but I was really selling stuff, so I call myself a sales assistant. That's not padding your resume. You can always ask your supervisor what to call yourself. And then use bullet points, starting with action verbs to describe accomplishments and things you did. Don't create a job description on paper, and use the correct verb tense. And this is what I mean by that. So Max Deluxe worked in Bob's paint store because, remember, he wants to work at Sherwin-Williams as a management trainee. So he said, well, how can I gain experience doing that? And he went out to the paint store in town and got a job. That's another mistake. You can catch my mistakes if you want, but I would check those tabs before I save it as a PDF and send it off. But note the action verbs: provide service, train staff, track inventory, make recommendations, and then an accomplishment, recognize for strong performance. So this is what you want to accomplish with your job description write-up. And some jobs can be written very differently depending on what you're applying to do. I've worked with resident assistants, and you know, that job could be written up in a very touchy-feely education speak way. You know, providing nurturing, living, learning environments for college students. You know, helping manage crisis and resolving behavioral issues through teachable moments, things like that. Would an accounting firm or healthcare provider want to see language like that? Probably not. It's too. It's a helping profession language. They may want to see, you know, inventoried keys and maximized a budget to plan 5 programs, things like that, concrete things. So be thoughtful about how you write up what you've done based on what you want to do. And here's another thing about experience. I introduced the senior vice president for Genuine Parts at a presentation to students not too long ago, and I heard him tell students across the curriculum, you know, he was the VP for HR, and this is a Fortune 500 company with an international presence, and he told students, don't neglect the other things that you've done. You may think that they don't relate, but they tell me that you've got work ethic, and that you know how to be someplace on time, that you can work on teams, that you've got transferable soft skill sets and things like that. So if you've got discipline-specific experience, and then you've got unrelated experience, say this, or an assistant manager in a Pizza Hut or something like that, and it's more recent, if you stay within a reverse chronology, you would have to take that Pizza Hut and put it above your discipline-specific or your field-specific experience. Would you want to do that? No, you wouldn't. Here's how to solve that. Have 2 experience sections. Prioritize your related experience. So if you've got nursing experience and you want to be a nurse, you'll have nursing experience or healthcare experience or nursing and related experience, so that you can put volunteer work in nursing homes and things like that there too. And then you might have other experience, or more specifically management and administrative experience, lower on the resume. And that Pizza Hut assistant manager job will still serve you well. It will eventually fade off of your resume, but not now. It still shows that you're employable and you've got transferable skill sets and that you're responsible and you'd be a good hire. So here's just a couple of things. Again, strategic headings, use action verbs, don't let it be passive, and describe your experience in the context of your application as I described. Other activities, is reading okay? Hobbies, other activities? Yes, no? You're not sure, are you? Played tennis in high school. Okay, that's sort of insulting. You'll proofread and not misspell things, but what else about that? Probably not. High school typically for college students no longer goes on your resume. There's a huge asterisk next to that because there are definitely exceptions. How about that?
Sure.
Nope. Maybe your first resume as a first semester college student or a first year college student, you may still have some exemplary leadership from high school, things like that. If you're in early college, for sure. But if you're a college student in a program of study, gaining experience as you should and gaining a foundation in a specific direction, then high school fades from your resume. It got you into college, but it didn't, it's not going to be conventionally something you keep. However, there are exceptions. If you're a nursing aspirant and you were a nursing assistant in high school, if you want to be a construction manager and you were a high school construction management club president, something that shows longevity of experience, teaching cadets, things like that, then if it strongly relates to what you want to do, I might still reach back for a while and keep high school on the resume, but typically no. And I don't put high school under my education. You're in college, you'll put Southwestern Community College, and then your expected graduation or completion date, and then that'll stay on your resume if you go to a professional, job, and that's your education credential. If you do transfer or move to a 4-year degree program, then it will just move slightly down under education, but still be there. Some of the best and brightest 4-year degree seekers and graduate school graduate students I've ever worked with have Southwestern Community College on their resumes, and it is a strong education credential. So keep it on there forever. Love walking on board. How about this? Is that ridiculous? That's ridiculous. Okay. It used to be that hobbies and things like that would land on resumes. Not anymore, probably because of all of those other things I described that have crowded them off. But typically, it needs to be professional. It can be in leadership or service, but not personal interests unless they relate. Here are some other useful headings: leadership, service, professional memberships. Every one of you should join if there's a professional association involving your discipline. Talk to your faculty, they'll tell you. And you can join that usually as a student member, and that's going to give you a professional journal, it's going to give you access and knowledge of conferences, it's going to show that you're interested in professional development and networking. Other related activity, undergraduate research, computer skills, language skills, related coursework, if it relates. But these things can be combined. Sometimes I've seen leadership and service combined, and that can be effective. So whatever makes sense here, but be thoughtful. I know this is a small font, but this is Max's resume. We built it from the top down already. A couple of points. Note that he interned at WCU's Mountain Heritage Center. And those bullet points are missing. So there's all kinds of mistakes on this sample resume. I just want to point that out and acknowledge it. But he wrote that up in a way that appeals to Sherwin-Williams or a business, not to a museum or a historical society or something like that. If he were applying to work at the Smithsonian, he might talk about preservation of artifacts and related knowledge that he gained. But since he's going to work in Sherwin-Williams, he talked about marketing, and he talked about managing volunteers, which sounds like supervision, and he provided logistical support. He did some event planning, and so that transfers to a management job. That's what I mean by customizing your resume, by strategically thinking about describing your experience in the right context. And then you can see he put sales and related experience here, and he wrote that up in a way that it makes it clear that it's related. Put a couple of leadership and service activities here just to show you how I might represent that lower on the document. If I've got a ton of service that's related, I might dedicate a section to it. Otherwise, I might combine it like that. And then computer and language skills, in this case, is combined. Excel, PowerPoint, Word, conversational Spanish. Don't overstate a technical skill that you might have or a language skill that you might have. Fluent is a powerful word, and it really means something. It means that you are fluent. So if you've had a few Spanish classes and you can you converse in the workplace a little bit and read it and make sense of it, that might make you an asset, but don't put fluent unless you are fluent. So that's just a heads up. Okay. The letter of application is important, also called a cover letter, and this is critical. Like I said at the beginning, a generic letter will not serve you well. A generic letter of application says to me that I'm one of 200 recipients of the same application. I'm not special to you. You're just throwing it out there and hoping that somebody bites. I'm not likely to respond. My wife was on a search committee, and there were 275 applications that all were qualified. She's a professor in a field, and everyone had a PhD in that field, research and teaching experience. Doesn't that make your head hurt? Would you like to go through all 275 complex long CVs and try to compare apples to apples and make a decision? No. You know what she did? I do this too when I'm on committees or when I'm a hiring manager. She went into the letters first and looked for people who really wanted to work at her college. She looked for people they wanted to work at a school that size, or more importantly, they were interested in the curriculum or what was offered by her department and could make connections to that. Or we live in a special place. Maybe they wanted to hike in the Smokies. Don't make it all personal and unprofessional, but give people a reason that you want to work for them. So target it. I should have used numbers instead of bullets here. You want to make it look like a formal business letter. Left justification, single space, separate your paragraphs by a line of space, use the same font as your resume so the documents go together. But then follow this outline. Your first paragraph, state your purpose. Don't introduce yourself. Dear so-and-so, my name is Michael. I am a student at Southwestern Community College. I am studying this. You've lost me if I'm reading that letter. I am writing you to apply for a respiratory therapist or a nursing or an accounting position with Acme Enterprises where I can contribute X, Y, and Z. It's going to look a lot like that objective statement, that effective objective. But come right out and say why you're writing the letter. The next paragraph is critical, and this is what a lot of people read for. Give me a reason that you want to work for me. Show that you've been to my website, that you've read the job description, that you're purposeful. And then after that, you've really got my attention. Then tell me why you can make contributions, what qualifies you to be an asset to me. And this is where this is the meat of the letter. This is what everybody identifies as a letter of application or cover letter. But then you can really make those points. And then at the end, don't overcomplicate it. Just simply restate your enthusiasm. Proofread this as well. just like the resume. References, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about references. First of all, they don't go on the resume. They'll go on a separate page of paper. References for Mike Despeaux. And then, should they be family members? No, that's intuitively a no, right? Friends? No. Youth group advisors? Well, maybe there's a situation where that might be okay, but typically no. Here's a definition. References should always be people who have had oversight for work that you have done. And you can define work fairly broadly. It could be as a student leader in an organization. It could be certainly as an employee or as an intern. And it could also be as a student in a class. If you've got a faculty member you've had for 5 classes or they're your advisor, you could certainly ask them to be a reference for you if you feel as if you've done good work. Yes?
How many, if you had a good stack of people that are willing to write you a letter of recommendation,
Yep.
how many of those is too many? If they're all people that have had more authority
Yep.
over you and have seen you in the past 2 or 3 years, how many is too many?
How many is too many? Whether it's letters of recommendation, if that's requested, or whether it's just telephone references. That's a good question that a lot of people reference with. It's a little bit of wrestle with. It's a little bit of a loaded question because there's no definitive right answer. I can give you the conventional number, which would be 3 or 4, is typical. I usually wouldn't provide 5 or 6 or 8 unless I'm asked to do so, or it's a special case. Here are professional references, here are some other references based on what I'm requested. Typically follow directions. If you're told to provide 3 references, then provide 3 references, not 2, not 4. And then in absence of that, 3 or 4 is an appropriate number. More than that, it starts to get too many to wade through. And then another thing, I'd choose the references that are most aligned with what I'm seeking to do. So, I'd choose the ones I feel like could give me the best reference in the context of my application. And these are some simple, there are maybe some other categories, but these are the basic ones. Student organization advisors, faculty members, present or earlier, previous direct supervisors. And that's a short list, not the state senator who thinks well of you, unless you've worked for her. So you don't try to impress me with somebody's big title if they can't say under what context they knew you and that they met this definition. They're a great networking contact. They may connect you to a job, but they're probably not your best job reference. Because my first question, if I call you, is how do you know so and so? And it better be, they worked for me or I had oversight for this, that type of thing. Now, this is critical. Ask them first. Why? 1, courtesy. Nobody likes being taken for granted. 2, it's self-serving. If you ask me to be your reference, I've supervised you, the first thing I'm going to do is say, great, give me your resume and your letter and give me a heads up so I can anticipate a call and best represent your interests. My wife finished school and she, every single Thursday, she's a first generation college student, her dad was a Little Debbie delivery man, and she stocked his warehouse every Thursday throughout college at 4 a.m. without missing a week. And her advisor knew that, and so when she applied to for admission to a PhD program in mathematics, which is a serious program, he was able to say, in addition to being a 4.0 student in math, she got up every Thursday at 4. It was unbelievable. She has a work ethic that will make her successful. So make your references aware of everything that you've done so that they can speak beyond even that context. And then the other reason to ask them first is they might say no, or they may not be really excited about it, and you don't want to be cursed by a lukewarm reference. That's a phrase people are familiar with. Cursed by a ambivalent or lukewarm reference, that'll do more harm than good for you too. So ask them first.
Because for me, I've hired lots of people. People give me 3 references and then I can't get a hold of any of them, so then I'll call that person back. But then by then I'm like done with it. I can't spend days chasing down, their references, and they will be too if you have other choices.
That's a really good point. You want to make sure that they use that phone number and that email address and that they're reachable. And the other aspect of that point is don't make it the responsibility of your prospective employer to hunt down that reference, provide accurate, full contact information for that reference, because a lot of folks won't take the time or don't have the time to do what you should be doing and locate that reference. So provide good contact information, give them a heads up so that they will anticipate the call. And in many cases, they'll let you know when they've been called, which is will address your anxiety as an applicant too. That's bonus. Okay. Beyond that, here's some resources. The Career Center is in Balsam on the right. When you walk in the front door in the Balsam Center, it has Career Center over the door. There is my email address and my telephone number. I would be more than happy to meet with each of you and meet you where you're at and help you build a resume or improve the resume that you've got. The best way to reach me is to send a email with a Microsoft Word attached resume, or if you don't have one yet, just contact me and make an appointment. If you're not on campus, if you're a distance learner, if you're on the Macon County campus or elsewhere, or it's not convenient for you to come to Balsam, I can meet with you online through Google Hangouts. By November, or really sometime in October, there will be more information and content on the Career Center's website about resume writing. I will look at it on a screen with you and provide rolled up sleeves, hands-on help. But every one of you needs a resume. You need it now, not later when you're going to be applying for jobs. Not to serve as a repository for what you've done, although it is a good capture point before you forget stuff that you've done, but also as a planning document, a living document that will help you identify things you can do between now and when you graduate that will make you a better candidate for a position. So I encourage every Southwestern student to begin a resume immediately, not when they're getting ready to graduate, not when they're applying for other educational opportunities or for jobs, but now. And your Career Center is here to help. So thank you all very much.